Welcome to the Women Arise podcast, where you'll hear firsthand stories from around the world of women working together to overcome challenges they face.
Welcome to the Women Arise podcast. I'm really excited to have with me today Becky Posey-Williams, who is Senior Director for Sexual Ethics and Advocacy at the General Commission on the Status and Role of Women, and that is within the United Methodist Church. Becky, how are you today?
I'm great, Neelley. Thank you for this invitation and for this opportunity to get to meet you and share what we're doing here at CASRA.
Well, I'm really excited. We've got some interesting things to talk about for sure. To start out with, you and I both grew up in Mississippi during the Civil Rights era, and I know that that had an impact on my life in peace and justice seeking. I just wondered what you have found to be true within your own life. How did growing up in Philadelphia, Mississippi, impact your role in the church and your desire to find peace and justice in the world?
Yeah. Well, I love that you're asking me that question because it's certainly a significant part of my story and one that I love to get to share when I can. I did grow up in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Lived there my entire childhood until I left to go to college, and actually continued to live in Mississippi until 7 years ago when I accepted this position and moved to Chicago. I come from a long line of lifelong United Methodists, and I've always been very active in the United Methodist Church, and that was true during my childhood in the 60s when the Civil Rights era was in its full activeness, certainly in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And I tell people so often that under the leadership of Bishop Clay Lee, who was my local pastor at First United Methodist in Philadelphia, the church was a prophetic voice. And I have never forgotten that. And as I go around our denomination worldwide, challenging people to stand up to what is wrong in the face of sexual misconduct in the church, oftentimes what we realize is that we're asking, or I am asking people to stand up against long-held attitudes and beliefs. Certainly long-held attitudes and beliefs around gender and power and authority. And I saw Bishop Lee do that in the 60s, stand up against long-held attitudes and beliefs around race in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And I know that Philadelphia and so many places in our world still have a lot of work to do, and at the same time, a lot of work has been done. And I can't help but believe in part the growth that has happened has come from certainly in that area, the Methodist Church being one of the places that was the prophetic voice for society.
Yeah, I think that is key, isn't it? The prophetic voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what we really need right now.
We do.
Absolutely, we do. I stand firm on the notion that certainly when we talk about sexual misconduct in the church, so often it is fueled by those deeply held attitudes and beliefs around gender, around power, around authority, and certainly around race as well.
For sure. Yeah, I was actually listening to a TED Talk from 2015 with Jimmy Carter, who talked about the mistreatment of women being the number one human rights problem in the world today. And he talked about the misinterpretation of scripture really having a lot to do with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. As the ones who have often perpetrated this and created this problem, we have a role and responsibility in helping correct it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's everyone.
Yeah.
And so when we say we have a role and responsibility, I mean, there is no one that is excluded from that. And certainly, again, in regards to the work of prevention of and response to sexual misconduct in the United Methodist Church, I hear myself weekly saying to people that the trench is not very deep, of people who want to do this work. And yet we have to do this work.
Yes. We need more workers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what impact do you think that the Me Too movement has had on the church's discussion about its own problems?
Yeah, well, it has certainly had an impact. I will begin with that. Just this morning, I have already been dealing with a situation in an annual conference that involves behaviors that took place over 20 years ago. And so we have certainly seen an increase in adults coming forward who experienced sexual abuse as a child or teen at the hands of leadership within the church. And that has certainly been one increase. The other thing that I would say is that in response to the Me Too movement, our United Methodist Council of Bishops joined with us in releasing a letter, a joint letter, acknowledging the sin of sexual misconduct within the church and the zero tolerance that would be established, and the request for people to come forward and allow bishops the opportunity to get to hear individuals' stories with a vow that they would listen well and that they would respond as we say we will respond, in a way that holds people accountable for their behavior and offers healing for all who are affected.
Mm-hmm. That's so important. Those of us who have experienced sexual trauma in our lives know how easy it is to be re-traumatized when you share that with someone and they don't listen with open minds.
Yeah.
So actually, I mean, could you say a little about what the process is to train those who are receiving the information to understand how to respond, like with those initial words of,
Sure. Well, I do a lot of that training around the denomination throughout the world. And we have been very fortunate to have bishops in our central conferences who have invited me in to be a part of training among their leadership, district superintendents, DCMs, boards of ordained ministry, and so forth. It's an ongoing process. It's one that I encourage to be ongoing. Reverend Clint Gill in Mississippi, retired elder in the Hattiesburg area, oftentimes would introduce me when I would be speaking around Mississippi. And he would stand up as a retired elder, very respected retired elder, and say, "I'm an insurance rich man. I am fortunate enough to have a car and I own car insurance. I am fortunate enough to have a home and I own home insurance." And he would go down the list and he would say, "And I hope and pray I never have to use any of them. But I would never not review that policy every year." That's just makes sense to do that. And so I'm a strong advocate building upon Clint's wisdom. I'm a strong advocate of this is training that does not ever need to stop. There needs to be constant awareness and attention given to this by the leadership of the church. In 2000 and gosh, I forget what date it is, but in this quadrennium, let me just put it that way. I believe it was 2017. I know it was. In the fall 2017 Council of Bishops meeting, they invited me in to for 2 different training opportunities for the bishops, retired, the full Council of Bishops, and then another training the following day with the resident bishops around responding to misconduct. So, as I say, it's constant. It is constant. I have some general rules of thumb that I just push and push and push. And the first one is simply acknowledging a genuine appreciation for the person being willing to gather up the courage to come forward and share this horrific story. Just simply saying thank you for bringing this information to my attention. Just simply beginning there and never underestimating the power of healing in genuinely offering that to a person who's willing to come forward. So I ask the people that I train, are you willing to genuinely show up fully and listen well and hear the person's story and hold this story in a very safe space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's one of the key differences that I've seen in the Women Arise movement is that, like, we think about Me Too as naming it. Like, people started naming this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And with Women Arise, I mean, one of the key things that we're focusing on is that the image of God is in everybody on the face of this earth, and that image is meant to flourish and shine. And there's that healing component. You wrote in your blog in December about the importance of an authentic apology. You actually wrote, I grew up understanding the importance of saying, I am sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I behaved
Exactly.
in a way that could have contributed to someone feeling hurt. I have never questioned the rightness of an authentic apology.
That's correct.
Say more about authentic apologies. I want to hear about what role do you think they played in helping the process of healing from sexual harassment and violence?
Well, I could talk about that all day because I hear too often stories from individuals who have never received an apology. And oftentimes it is the first and foremost piece that they are wanting. Whether they can name that, articulate that or not, it very genuinely is what they're wanting to hear, authentic. So let me back up just a minute and say the blog you read was written because our agency, through the leadership of our board of directors, has made a decision to submit legislation to our general conference in May. And that legislation has been submitted that offers a new resolution that is an apology by the United Methodist Church for the harm that has been inflicted in the name of sexual misconduct within the life of the church. And I feel very strongly that the time is now that needs to be offered. So that was the purpose of that blog. I have learned so much from Dr. Jennifer Fried, who is a psychologist at the University of Oregon. She actually spoke for us at our Do No Harm conference in the fall of 2018. And Dr. Fried has written much and completed years and years and years of research around what she terms as institutional betrayal. When someone turns to the institution that they are a part of, where they have experienced the misconduct, and the institution does not listen well, does not respond in a way that promotes healing, does not hold people accountable for their behavior, and as a result betrays the person who has come forward. And I have listened to too many stories of people who have said the trauma from that betrayal was equal, if not more, than the trauma they experienced from the actual abuse. And so an authentic apology says, I, the perpetrator, am willing to name the behavior that I did that was offensive, that was hurtful, that was criminal, that was traumatic. And in naming it, I am willing to take responsibility and own it. In other words, I am not going to blame this on someone else. I'm not going to try to reverse this and make you the perpetrator and me the victim. I am going to name it. I'm going to own it. I'm going to accept responsibility. And included in that responsibility is a genuine vow to understand myself better, to do the work, to understand myself, to know thyself, so that I can understand what was going on in my life that contributed to me getting myself in a position where I would choose, and I carefully choose that word, choose. I would choose to violate a boundary that would cause harm to a person I'm in ministry with. And that I will do everything in my power to know myself well enough that this will not ever happen again. And I thank you for bringing this forward so that I can do that work. To me, that is an authentic apology.
Yes.
And we have written templates. I have written templates for an apology from the perpetrator and for an apology from the bishop's office. And those are available to every annual conference through our work.
You were talking about authentic apology. We were talking about the United Methodist Church. And so I just want to ask you, which other denominations actually have someone in the type of position that you're in, which helps expose this and bring people to a higher level of functioning and also justice and peace?
Mm-hmm. Well, honestly, I'm not aware of another denomination that has a position exactly like mine. I am aware through contacts that have been made, either I've reached out or they've reached out to me, that other denominations are developing protocols for how this will be addressed within their denomination. For instance, I have been in contact with members of a newly formed task force within the Episcopal Church in the U.S. Who are charged with developing a comprehensive protocol and plan within the Episcopal Church for preventing and responding. I've been in contact with people through the Catholic Church, through the Lutheran Church. Recently was interviewed with someone who was following the work of the Southern Baptist Church, following some pretty big public cases that have come to light. So, and then there are ecumenical groups such as Faith Trust Institute and Reverend Dr. Marie Fortune, who is a pioneer in this work and who I have studied under on quite a few occasions and have the utmost respect for her work. And her work is very ecumenical.
That's terrific. That's really good to see. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Truth and Reconciliation process that we've read about from South Africa, and the being able to bring forth the truth and admit one's guilt and complicity in something, and then finding healing past that. Do you see any comparisons?
Yeah, I do. I think it is all about naming the truth, this work. I think it is all about being transparent with within the roles that are involved in whether it's prevention of or response to. I think almost always, certainly within the United Methodist Church, if there is a way for these situations to be responded to that encourage restorative justice and the process of just resolution, then in the name of reconciliation, that is what we would hope for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned those words, restorative justice, because I think that most of us just think about the justice systems within our own countries, which is someone does a crime, they do time, they're released, and restoration is not really the government's program. What can you say? What can you offer about what restoration really looks like to someone who's a survivor?
Well, I think when I have seen our process work well, I have seen persons very clearly, without question, understand what is expected of them in the name of accountability for behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen authentic apologies be offered in that exact same situation. And I have seen offers and recommendations for healing services, resources in the name of individual therapy, in the name of spiritual direction, whatever else that a person may need, given freely without anyone having to ask for that. And to me, when these situations are responded to in that way, the opportunities for people to be restored or put in place.
Yeah.
And I will say, Neelley, we have a responsibility to get this right.
Yes.
Every time. It's not okay to only get it right 6 out of 10 times. We have a responsibility to get it right every time. And that requires not doing it alone. That requires reaching out for help. That requires taking the time and not trying to sidestep genuinely listening to stories, genuinely researching what resources are available, genuinely taking the time and not trying to rush through and hurry up and cover up. There's phenomenal scripture in the Bible, especially the story of David and Bathsheba, that we recently, at our Do No Harm conference, Bishop Sharma Lewis and the United Methodist Church from the Virginia conference offered a phenomenal closing worship service at that event, and the title of her sermon was "The Great Cover Up," and that is the scripture that was used, and that actually is available along with our opening worship service from Bishop Robert Schnase. Is available for anyone to see online at our umsexualethics.org website.
Okay, great. And we will link to that and resources for sure. Yeah. I think, King David, like nobody wants to call him a rapist.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you look at power dynamics,
mm-hmm.
Clearly that's what happened.
That's right. And it is my favorite theological grounding piece to help people understand the concept, the relation of power to sexual misconduct. That's a very that's an issue that a lot of people struggle with. They will name sexual misconduct an affair. And I say sexual misconduct is not an affair. It may look like an affair, but an affair is consensual. Mm-hmm. Sexual misconduct is about the abuse and misuse of power. Mm-hmm. Every time. If you are a leader in a church or ministry of any setting, you, because of that role, you automatically have inherent power. Mm-hmm. And how you use that power is your choice. Are you going to use it to empower people, or are you going to use it to help people feel heard and healed through the offering of resources? So are you going to use it to help people, or are you going to use it to hurt people? That's your choice.
Yeah. You work with people all around the world.
I do.
So many different cultures that are at different levels and phases of women as church leaders, as district leaders, as Episcopal leaders. Are there any successes that you can share that you feel like you saw some real change?
So yes, 3 stories come to mind immediately. This past November, our General Secretary and I were invited by Bishop Edward Kige in the United Methodist Church to come to St. Petersburg, Russia, and be a part of the first ever women's retreat in the Eurasia Conference of the United Methodist Church. And Bishop Kige has certainly appointed women in leadership positions to serve as district superintendents and various positions in Russia. And he was so supportive and such an advocate of lay and clergy women being present for these 5 days at a retreat center for the purposes of beginning to examine the statement, I am created in the image of God. And so what does that mean to you as a woman when you say that? And helping in walk them through daily Bible studies and workshops and different retreat opportunities to help them begin to really claim who they are in the image of God as women and as women leaders within the church. So that was an unbelievable experience to get to be a part of that. And especially that it was the first ever. And then in June of last year, I had the opportunity to be a part of a Do No Harm conference that was offered in the Philippines among the 3 Episcopal areas in the United Methodist Church in the Philippines. And we had provided a scholarship for 3 people from the Philippines to come to our big Do No Harm event in 2018. And those 3 people went back, met with the bishops there, and developed their own program there. During that 4-day event, Neelley, so many, and this event was held among about 60 of the leaders in those 3 Episcopal areas. During that event, so many personal stories were shared that Bishop Francisco went to the microphone, stood up, had certain leaders come forward and vowed that there would be a physical place that every person in the church knew was available for that was safe, where they could come and share their stories. And then I've had the opportunity to be in Mozambique, where the Bishop Manala, stood up and said to her leadership, this will not be tolerated anymore. We will not continue to sanction dating members of our congregations as leaders. That we have enough churches in Mozambique. Somebody can go to a different church and not be in that power vulnerable relationship of leader and parishioner. So it's just been remarkable things that I've had the opportunity to get to.
One of my favorite quotes is, and I'm just going to paraphrase from Dr. Martin Luther King. He said that freedom must be demanded by the oppressed. It will never be given by the oppressor. What role do you think that the women's voices play in bringing this forth and finding healing?
I think those voices have been silenced for so long. Again, open the Bible. There's a whole lot of stories about women who have no names. Yes. And today in our world, there are still a lot of stories about women who have no names. And we have not done our best. Or maybe we have, and perhaps we're becoming more educated and more knowledgeable, and there's more wisdom around what providing opportunities for people to come forward looks and feels and must be like. But I guess I'm 62 years old. So when I think, how long will I be doing this work? Certainly with the changes that may potentially take place within the United Methodist Church. And I think, what is the one thing I would want to be able to walk away from here and leave? And I think if above everything, it would be that victims and survivors know that their voice is important, that it must be heard, that retaliation will not be tolerated in any form, shape, way whatsoever, and that they would be supported and encouraged to speak out on their behalf. When I think about, I think one of your questions to me was, what would I like to see happen in the church and the world? And I sat there and I was looking at that and I was thinking, okay, here's a chance to answer that. What would it be? And it was so difficult to tone that down to one thing. But the one thing within the church that I can say is, what I would like to see is that there is never again institutional betrayal when something happens to a person within the life of the church, and that person makes a choice to come forward and share it. And within the world, I thought, I think if I had a magic wand and could wave it, that there would be a movement throughout this world that says all really does mean all. And that there is no one excluded from knowing the love and the peace of God in whatever name God may be for that person. That it really would be all.
Thank you so much, Becky, for sharing this time with us today. I think it has been a really encouraging conversation to know that the United Methodist Church has the commission on the status and role of women. That agency plays a pivotal point in the church's moving forward with justice and peace for women in the years and generations to come. And I'm thankful that you were there. I hope that this year brings many good things for you and for that agency. And may we find that place that we so desire in our hearts become reality before our eyes. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Neelley. This has been great fun. And I so appreciate you, who you are, the ministry that you are providing to our world, and look forward to our paths crossing and a connection staying very strong between our work.
Yes, yes, we will do it together. We can do this.
Absolutely.
And just to let all of our listeners know, I will be posting Becky's contact information as far as which website to go to find the resources that she mentioned. You'll be able to find links there. And I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Women Arise podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss a single episode. For more information or to make a donation to support the efforts of Women Arise, please visit womenarisecollective.org.